New Orleans Saints tight end Jimmy Graham says he's 6'7", he loves the red zone, but most of all, he's just happy to be home. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome in to a bonus Saturday episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen or second listen of the day every single day. And of course, if you want to, you can always subscribe and follow for free. Be an everydayer here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, you can always continue the conversation with me one-on-one, get in on our exclusive film studies, Q&As, early info, insider info, and much more by heading over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints to join a community, which I would love for you to be a part of. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media. You can find me as the senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site, covering the New Orleans Saints every Tuesday on the Locked On NFL podcast, and here with you every single Monday through Friday, and as evidenced by today and then some, here on Locked On Saints. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to get to our play of the day, as well as a bunch of notes from today's practice, led off by A.T. Perry, taking a little bit of a step today, which was very, very noticeable. We're also going to take a look at the run game over on the defensive side and how things can look really good for both sides of the football in this element. But first, I want to start off with Jimmy Graham. We had a great conversation with Jimmy Graham, who was given a veteran rest day today, as was Michael Thomas, but Michael Thomas did get some reps in. It's very hard to keep Michael Thomas off the field. The only other player that we didn't see was defensive end and defensive lineman Jabari Zuniga. Dennis Allen told us straight up, look, if there's anything to be concerned about injury-wise, he will volunteer that information to us. And so I assume that Jabari Zuniga was also a veteran day off as well. But Jimmy, even though he didn't participate in practice, he did still come and chat with us in media, which if you think about Jimmy's kind of career all the way through since he left New Orleans, he hasn't done a lot of media. He never really did a lot in Seattle, Green Bay, Chicago, wherever he was. But today he didn't participate, and he still did media availability with us, and he was so happy to do it. And the big takeaway here when it comes to Jimmy Graham is that this guy could not be happier to be back in New Orleans. So we're going to get to some of our big takeaways from his media availability here in just a sec. But I do want to highlight the other tight ends today. Everybody, when it came to the tight end group that did participate, looked really good. So I don't want to go this entire segment without talking about some on-field stuff. Foster Moreau catching a tight end screen. Pause. That's back. Well, not pause, but you know what I'm saying. Like, take a pause. So let that soak in. The tight end screen is back. Juwan Johnson catching passes in the flat as well as over the middle of the field. Lucas Kroll with a big diving catch at one point. This tight end group looks really, really good. And Juwan Johnson was speaking yesterday to us about Jimmy Graham and the rest of that tight end room and how it kind of feels like the Ninja Turtles, with Jimmy Graham being Master Splinter, where he sees himself and the other guys and all that. And so there is a ton of camaraderie in that tight end room, even though it is populated, right? It's very diverse too in terms of the skill sets, all of that stuff. So I think that I say that to say this. Even though Jimmy Graham didn't participate, he master splintered. He still came out and he spoke. And when he spoke to us, it was a vulnerable conversation. Jimmy hadn't really publicly addressed being traded by the New Orleans Saints and how that impacted him, how much he didn't like it. He spoke about that with us today. And he said, like, look, he was at that point, he learned that it was a business, never really held anything against the New Orleans Saints, but it did hurt. He mentioned that he was kind of peeved. He used a different word, but, you know, this is a family program, so I'm not about to start cussing up in here. Shout out to Tyler Rowland, Locked on Titans, who said that the other day, and I've been waiting to say it. But he talked about all that. And then he also, broke down a bit about, him trying to come back to New Orleans for most of the years. I asked him straight up too, like, hey, he mentioned basically that he had been trying to come back to New Orleans for a long time. Things hadn't really come to fruition yet. And so he hadn't been able to make the return to New Orleans until this year. And so I asked, was that a part of what played into you stepping away from the NFL for a year last season? And he said yes, that basically he kind of told his agent, Jimmy Sexton, that it was either he wanted to play in New Orleans or he wasn't going to play anymore. That simple. And he wanted to retire a New Orleans Saint, or he just simply wasn't going to play football any longer. He also told me that not only did the New Orleans Saints and him kind of go down the road and have some conversations at the beginning of last year, but they were in touch all throughout the season as well, but nothing really came to fruition until just a couple of months ago. Things kind of popped off and the Saints were interested. He was interested. They worked on the contract to figure out, how to get it all done. He shows up here in New Orleans just a few days ago on a vet minimum deal. And now he's a New Orleans Saint again after 8 years and some few days away from the organization. Which is not the longest gap, by the way, between a player being with an organization, leaving, and coming back with an organization. Doug Flutie, 16 years between his New England Patriots stint. Just a fun, interesting thing for you. But I'm really all about, where Jimmy Graham is and sort of mentally where he's at. He's clearly slimmed down. He moves really well. He was playing up at like 280, 285. We didn't get an exact weight from him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was more like 250, 260, maybe in the 270s, but he doesn't look like he's carrying a lot of weight right now. And he's moving well. He's doing well in reps. He's not having to go into the cooler during practices. At least I haven't seen him do that so far. So he's kind of managing everything pretty well, but today was a veteran rest day for him. Expect that he's going to get a few of those over the course of training camp. I have a big expectation in terms of what his role would be in New Orleans, although I don't have expectations for what he will produce in that role, because I think that can get a little bit unfair pretty quickly, especially somebody that watched, that grew up watching the 2011, 2013. I mean, grew up, I was already in my 20s by then, but you know what I mean? Like, seeing that Jimmy Graham, all throughout his career, I watched that. I saw all of that happen. And so I don't want to overinflate, what his role might be here as a 36-year-old in 2023. But it's clear that he would have a role. And when he was asked a little bit about what he feels he could bring to the team, I think it was Ricardo LeCompte with WWL TV that asked, he said, look, I'm 6'7" and I'm in the red zone, and I love the red zone. And I think that that's exactly what his role would be. I mean, look, he'd probably get involved a little bit between the 20s, but I don't think you have to rely on him there to get you down the field like you probably did at a earlier date when it was him and Marcus Colston. And obviously you can rely on those guys to go, to get you between the 20s and get you downfield. But you've got Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau who can all help you there. Lucas Kroll, potentially. I think Kroll probably ends up being a practice squad guy if Jimmy makes the roster. It seems like right now the way that I would adjust my 53-man roster for now in pencil would be Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Jimmy Graham, and then of course Taysom Hill is in that tight end room, but does so much more. Him on the field with Michael Thomas and Taysom Hill under center and Jamaal Williams in the backfield and Alvin Kamara in the slot, maybe, I don't know, use your imagination here, but whatever that 11 personnel is, whatever that 12 personnel group is that has either one tight end and one running back or two tight ends and one running back, that's a good red zone formula for you to have. Like, there's a lot of ingredients in that gumbo and they're all good. They're all good. They're all good red zone gumbo ingredients. I think that's what I'm going to call the red zone this year, the red zone gumbo. And so I do think that there is, an opportunity here for Jimmy Graham to be able to be a factor for the New Orleans Saints. He doesn't have to be somebody that wins them games unless he's making that last catch in the red zone, Kyle Rudolph-ish. Sorry to bring you back to that memory. We have a poll going here because we are live on YouTube. Big shout out to everybody that's here live. See all y'all. And I loved seeing everybody that was there at practice as well. And I see some folks here in the chat that were there as well. I appreciate y'all coming through. But, we've got a poll right now going with how many touchdowns do you think Jimmy Graham will score in 2023 should he make the roster? I started off with 0 because maybe some people think it would be 0. 1 to 3, 3 to 5, or 5 or more. That felt like a really good range. And right now we've got about 46% of the vote going to 3 to 5. And so if you're not here voting live, let me know what you think too. But I do think that there's a role for Jimmy Graham in the red zone. And those 3 to 5 red zone touchdowns could be all the difference between being a 50% scoring touchdown team in the red zone to being a 60 to 70% scoring touchdown team in the red zone. Those are important plays. Those are important drives, important touchdowns. So I think that that's his role in 2023. And it seems like he's ready and raring to go with it. Loves working with Derek Carr, loves working with this offense, the coaching staff, Clancy Barone, who's worked with veteran tight ends like Jimmy Graham late in their careers, like Tony Gonzalez and Kyle Rudolph and Algie Crumpler, of course, Antonio Gates. So what can a guy, we saw what Clancy Barone was able to do with those guys. What could he do with a Jimmy Graham? But overall, Jimmy Graham just so happy to see his way back to what he called home. Not New Orleans, but home. And you got to love that attitude. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at the run game for the New Orleans Saints, so the offensive and defensive side, but I'm going to particularly highlight the defense because that's a unit that was 24th in the NFL this year. And as far as I'm concerned with what I've seen through 4 days of camp, which I know isn't a lot, and the pads aren't on yet, but as a start, this New Orleans Saints team at least has the talent to buck that trend and get a lot better in run defense. I'll tell you why as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our partners over at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you the best fantasy football advice every week all season long. So whether you're prepping for the draft or scouring the waiver wire, we're going to provide you with the players that are going to be a guaranteed fit for your roster. So with draft prep underway for this upcoming fantasy football season, let's see who Vinny has selected for this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the week. If those top tier quarterbacks are already off the board on your upcoming fantasy football draft in 2023, there's another line of luxury passers and runners that are going to be the perfect fit for your lineup every single week. So that's why we're going to take a look at a quarterback that's driving a sleeker Jacksonville Jaguars offense that now features wide receiver Calvin Ridley. Trevor Lawrence is a top-tier passer with top 5 scoring upside as a QB1 that you should be taking a look at for this upcoming season. Vinny Iyer of Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you make sure that you win your fantasy football leagues. And eBay Motors knows that championship teams are all about players being the perfect fit, and the same goes for your vehicle. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories at your fingertips, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Whether you need air filters, brakes, batteries, tail lights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure that it's the right fit for your car because eBay's Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride just needs a little fixing up, because now you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle needs is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, all at the right price at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Big thank you to all the everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Every day we're here for our second show on a Saturday. I know I said I wasn't going to do it. I said if they practice on a Saturday or a Sunday, I would only do the live show in the evening, but I love you. I can't stay away. So let's get it. So I want to take a look now at the New Orleans Saints run defense, because I'll say this. The New Orleans Saints have accumulated the talent to massively improve their run defense from what they were last season. Remember, they were 24th in the NFL last year. That's a big-time drop-off after being top 5, top 10, top 3 in many seasons since 2017. So what are they getting right so far? And I'm going to mention the run offense as well, because believe it or not, both of them have had good showings. It's just in different ways. What we're seeing from the run defense right now, and really from the entire defensive line. So let me actually say it this way. It's the run defense, but it's the defensive line in particular. But to highlight where they needed the biggest improvement, it was really that run defensive side. And I think one of the reasons, or one of the things that you can look at on the field and see it all transpire is, are the players getting themselves in position to make plays? This is part of what Dennis Allen talked about in Friday's post-practice presser when he mentioned that, even without pads, you can still get a little bit of an idea of how the team is doing in the run because you can watch and see, okay, are you where you need to be able to make this play? That goes in the passing game as well. Alontae Taylor talked about that. You can look into film in a game and you can see, okay, Alontae Taylor went over the top of Cordero Patterson when he was playing against the Atlanta Falcons. When the top was already covered, if he would have went underneath, maybe he would have had an interception. That's the type of detail that the Saints are looking at. So just take that same idea and think about if the run game or if a run play is going to a certain gap or a certain hole that's being opened on the offensive line, are the players getting to that gap? Are they getting to that hole? And we're seeing that a ton. And we're seeing that from a lot of guys. Carl Granderson, who was one of the Saints' best, if not the best run defender that they had last year on the defensive line. And, it's between him and Cameron Jordan, of course. He was making plays in the run game, but also putting pressure on any and every quarterback. He had a pass rush move on the inside shoulder of James Hurst that we saw Peyton Turner pull off against, I think it was Trevor Penning earlier in the week, where he faked to the outside, cut back inside, swam over the inside shoulder and went directly in. So you can see all the pass rushing prowess, but he's also hitting those gaps, getting the run fits, being sound in the run game. We're also seeing guys like Peyton Turner, a fourth day to where he showed out and showed that he can make some plays over on the defensive side. That's a solid day for him. Isaiah Foskey got in on a couple of really good run stops as well. Had a couple of good pass rushes and pressures there too. You're seeing guys like Khalen Saunders and Nathan Shepard on the interior, mucking things up in the middle, making for the dirty work and everything, making things tougher on the New Orleans Saints offensive line, getting that immediate penetration right up the middle, all of those things. So we're seeing really, really good things and good signs to the New Orleans Saints run defense and defensive line. So it's clear that they have the talent. Now, the pads go on Monday. So that's really where we're going to learn a lot more, is going to be, when they're there. But right now, you can see that the talent is there. The building blocks, the foundation is there upon which they get to build Monday once the pads come on, which Monday, by the way, is still open to fans. So I don't know if there are tickets still available, but if you don't have tickets and you want to go, that's a good day to go. It's going to be hot. But with those pads on and kind of things getting a little bit more real, it's a good day to go. Things kind of get a little bit heated up. No pun intended with the weather during that day. Flip side, over on the offensive side, we're seeing some good things from the run game as well. We're not seeing a bunch of breakaway runs. We see some that look like breakaway runs every now and then. Certainly had a couple of those. But one of the things that 26, this was actually a play from the New Orleans Saints run defense from the second level. Zach Bond getting back there, making a big play on Eno Benjamin as well. So it's not just the defensive line. They're getting the supplementary run stopping as well. But there are a couple of big things. You've got Ellis Merriweather had a big run today in which he got to the outside on the left side. Kawan Baker with a good block over on the perimeter. We had a great run on a fantastic cutback by Kendre Miller. This was really good. This was a play flow that went to the right side of the offense. But Kendre Miller, the two things that I consistently talked about when it came to his, draft evaluation, plus, kind of when we were covering him pre and post draft, is his vision and his patience. And both of those were on display, as well as his one cut ability. I would compare Kendre Miller's running style to that of maybe a little Pierre Thomas-ish. I think not the full game, but the run game for him is kind of there. He's a bigger back. He can, run in between the tackles, but he's really patient. And he's got that step to where he can put his foot in the ground, decide, all right, I'm getting north and south, and then just get north and south. And he does that extremely well. He did exactly that today. That run flow, play flow kind of went to the right. He saw the run defense cluster all of that up, but because of his patience, he was able to cut back on a dime coming off of his right pivot foot, moving out towards the left, and it was just green grass open for him, although there were a couple of folks that were there and ready to make the stops, but it looked like it was going to be, an open field for him nonetheless. So those are great things. And the other thing that I would say is I see somebody saying Chris Ivory. That's another really, really good comp for Kendre Miller in terms of what Chris Ivory could have been. Kyrie Robinson had a little bit of that as well. I just didn't get a lot of opportunity in this Saints offense, but I think that there's a lot of good qualities that you can see in Kendre Miller. And of course, Alvin Kamara is, outstanding. Just there's nobody that moves as good as Alvin Kamara does. There will never be anybody that moves as well as Alvin Kamara does in the NFL ever again, as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that I want to highlight, though, is that a lot of these runs are going outside of the tackles. There are some runs that are going right up the middle. Of course, they're not completely, dissolving that from their playbook. You have to be able to run between the tackles in the NFL. But they're doing a lot of stuff outside the tackles, getting players in space, throwing to those running backs in space, Alvin Kamara included, screen passes to Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller and Jamaal Williams, everybody getting a screen pass. But the run game is diversifying beyond what we saw last year, to where it was a lot of run Alvin Kamara up the middle, up the middle, up the middle. Now we're seeing Alvin Kamara get these sort of outside runs. We saw Jamaal Williams get a stretch run to the outside. We saw some outside zone runs for guys like Kirk Merritt, Ellis Merriweather, as well as, of course, Kendre Miller. So you're seeing good things from there too. So the diversity of the run game is what stands out on the offense, but the overpowering presence of run defense is what's standing out about the run defense. So when you're going up against a weaker run defense, the Saints might be able to run all day. A la, was that 2017 against the Buffalo Bills, that wild game where even Trey Edmonds, I think it was, ran for a big old touchdown. Like the Saints, if they come across the wrong, or how should I say this? If the wrong team comes across the Saints in the run game, the Saints might be ready to just run all over them for a game. And don't forget, Taysom Hill's a part of that equation as well. So, and Taysom Hill got more QB snaps, stuff like that. We'll highlight that in just a moment when we get to the rest of our notes. But first, I want to tell you about the play of the day. Yeah, there were some fun things in 7-on-7s, but let me tell you about the connection between Derek Carr and his wide receivers and A.T. Perry taking the next step. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Looking at, as we do every third segment in our live shows as we wrap up the show here, is the play of the day as well as the player of the day. And really, I'm going to kind of like mesh this in together a little bit. I thought there were some players that had really, really good days. I'll mention Jake Haener real quick because we're not going to have an episode tomorrow since it's the day off, and I usually don't do Sunday episodes anyway. I'm giving y'all 2 episodes on a Saturday that I hope y'all aren't annoyed with how much you're seeing me right now. But I'm going to take some time to rest up tomorrow a little bit. But Jake Haener, since we're not going to do Rookie Watch tomorrow morning, was, just decisive, really good, moving the ball around and everything. So I could consider him one of the players of the day. But I want to focus on the play of the day here, and this was A.T. Perry and Derek Carr. A.T. Perry had 3 really solid catches today. He had one of them from Derek Carr. He had another one that came from Jake Haener, and then I think he had 2 big ones from Jake Haener, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm looking at my notes right now. I see the second one came from Jake Haener. Yeah, so it's been a lot of, it was really those 2 guys. So here's what happened. See, what happened was, A.T. Perry lined up on the left side of the formation. Michael Thomas is kind of in and out today. It was a veteran rest day, nothing to be worried about. So A.T. got a little bit, along with like Brian Edwards and a couple others, of those outside, weak side X-receiver snaps, the mold that you would expect him to be in the NFL. He was on the left side of the formation. Derek Carr takes a snap. A.T. starts to run an in-breaking route. So he's going from the left side, working towards his right, heading back towards the middle of the field. He's guarded by the one, the only Marshawn Lattimore. He's had an outstanding camp so far. He's looked really, really good in camp. And you could see Derek Carr with, it was Marshawn Lattimore with inside leverage on A.T. Perry as he was cutting towards the inside, so not advantageous. And then I believe it was Tyrann Mathieu over the top. you could see Derek Carr kind of point and gesture, go towards the outside, basically. So he gave him a mid-route adjustment. I wrote a piece over at Saints News Network. Oh, all the days are blending together. I think it was yesterday. It might have been the day before. About how the game of football is played pre and post snap. So there's the pre-snap adjustments, the pre-snap reads, all that stuff that happen before the ball is snapped. But then even after the ball is snapped, while these receivers are running routes, you'll see them, maybe if the defensive back or the cornerback is playing with a lot of depth, they'll shallow up their route, and maybe instead of running a 7-yard in, they'll run a 5-yard in or something like that. Other times, if the DB isn't getting a lot of depth, they might curve that route a little bit further, deeper downfield, get a little bit more depth on it. That's what happened day one between Derek Carr and Chris Olave. The corner was playing underneath, and so Chris Olave bent the route further upfield, got a little bit more depth, and then gave Derek Carr that pocket between the underneath defender and the up top defender to get the ball in. So in this scenario, Marshawn Lattimore has the inside leverage. A.T. Perry is kind of running this, this hook coming back towards the quarterback. You're not going to get anything there. And so Derek Carr says, he points and he goes, go, basically telling him with his hand, like, go towards the outside, go towards the sideline. A.T. Perry sees it, adjusts, gets out towards the sideline. Derek Carr places the pass perfectly outside and up high for A.T. Perry. The safety over the top couldn't close in time. Marshawn Lattimore got left in the, toward the middle of the field with he was giving chase basically. Boom. Big time connection between Derek Carr and A.T. Perry. That play might not be the big touchdown play deep downfield that Jake Haener threw to Lynn Bowden Jr. all the way down the left sideline, which happened during 7-on-7s. There was no pass rush, anything like that, but it was a beautifully placed pass, well-run route by Lynn Bowden Jr., great catch by Lynn Bowden. Really, really good stuff. Could have been the play of the day, but to me, that right there was the play of the day because you saw this working with the starting quarterback with a pass rush, the offensive line buying Derek Carr time to where he can give the adjustment, A.T. Perry seeing the adjustment, making the adjustment, getting towards the outside, leaving Marshawn Lattimore, and then the perfect placement of the pass, and then A.T. Perry making the catch. And everybody's concern around A.T. Perry is, can he become a more consistent catcher than what we saw, pass catcher, than what we saw at Wake Forest? That type of play, all those little elements that I just broke down, all happened in 4 or 5 seconds. That is what builds confidence for a rookie. That is what builds confidence for a quarterback in that rookie. And we didn't see A.T. Perry put another pass on the ground the entire rest of practice after that moment. I'm waiting for A.T. Perry to get some one-on-ones because if he wins a one-on-one here and there, that confidence is just going to skyrocket. It's going to go through the roof. And so I'm ready to see that. But this was a really, really good way to not just win in one-on-ones where it's weighted for you, right? To where, one-on-ones are kind of the advantage always goes to the receiver. The receiver knows what he's doing. The DB does not. A natural edge goes to the receiver. That wasn't what this was. This was your first route got taken away. Now let's make the adjustment on the fly and get this gain. And they were able to do that. So I absolutely love that for A.T. Perry. Love that for Derek Carr as well. Because again, this is the kind of stuff that makes Derek Carr a good addition to the New Orleans Saints roster, is because of his ability to do those kinds of things, not just in the huddle, but doing it on field and getting it done. So great stuff there. All right, let's get to a couple of notes for you. Taysom Hill rotated in with Jameis Winston for the first set of team drills with the second team. During that time, he was able to get a couple of passes off this time. I'm trying to work my way over to it, but he ran a couple of times, did a couple of keepers, all those other things. But it was good. It's good to see him continuously get mixed in at quarterback. It's just one of those things that everyone knows they're going to do it, so you might as well practice it. You're not hiding anything anymore. You know what I mean? Everyone knows the way that Taysom's going to be utilized. So he threw one pass to Kendre Miller, which was a screen. He did a keeper. It looked like Ugo Amadi was in position. That safety, Ugo Amadi, always looks like he's in position in the run game. He's been outstanding there. And then there was another to where he ran kind of this zone read or RPO, if you will, with Ellis Merriweather, held on to it. Great blocks on the left side by Brian Edwards. Told you he was a good blocker. And Foster Moreau. So that was pretty cool. It was the old Raiders tandem of pass catchers blocking not for Derek Carr, but for Taysom Hill instead. So really cool to see all of that. The kicker battle wages on. Blake Grupe went 6 of 6. So he is now 12 of 12. Will Lutz is 11 of 12 throughout camp. That doesn't tell us anything just yet, but we'll see how things continue to roll along. Lou Hedley had some nice punts today, including a couple of hang times that were really close to 5 seconds. So the special teams battle continues to wage on. I will tell you that we saw some unique usage or some interesting and fun usage for Rashid Shaheed. Not only did we see him run a wheel route out of the backfield, but we also saw him run a jet sweep. So this offense is ready to be the exciting New Orleans Saints offense that we're accustomed to seeing here in the Big Easy. So great to see them working on all that and continue to get all that done. Just as a quick reminder, Jimmy Graham not at practice today, but still spoke to us afterwards. It was a vet rest day for him. Michael Thomas was in and out. He took one snap with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston put the pass up for him. He was tightly guarded by Isaac Yiadom, who had a fantastic day today. Isaac Yiadom also was beat on a play by Rashid Shaheed deep down the field. Derek Carr throws that one up. It would look like a surefire touchdown, but Isaac did not panic. He did not give up on the play, fought with Rashid Shaheed for that ball all the way to the ground, knocked it out, won that rep. This one, he was in really tight coverage against Michael Thomas. Didn't get his head around, so it might have ended up being called a pass interference, but Jameis kind of put the pass up for Mike to be able to get him a rep in. Mike tried to do the one, those catches where you see guys like reach over the DBs and catch it up against their back. Came down hard on his back, which kind of stunk, but got up, went back, was all good, and then kind of was, taking that day off anyway at that point. But that, when he came down on his back, was like, I'm good for today. So we'll see more Michael Thomas on Monday. So that gets us through all of our biggest news and notes. If you need more, you're looking for more observations, things like that, you can always head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints. Get it all immediately. You can head over to saints.media, which is the Saints News Network site. John Hendricks, my colleague there, has a great article up with all the other observations. So if you want some more, we got it for you wherever you want to grab it. So I appreciate y'all as always. Again, tomorrow's off for me on Sunday, but I'll be back with you Monday morning and then Monday evening again. We're back to 2-a-days to get you ready all throughout the second week of New Orleans Saints training camp. So I appreciate y'all as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day to all the everydayers out there. I want to give a big shout out to Samuel. I want to give a big shout out to Davis. I want to give a big shout out to Aaron, who all said hi. And I want to give a very, very special shout out to Dylan as well. Dylan, I am your biggest fan. I appreciate y'all very much for saying hi and blessings to you and your family. I appreciate y'all very, very much. As always, make me a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, please, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on whatever social media you're using at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.